Did the US EV market just implode? GM is gutting its EV division. Ford is halting Lightning production. And the newest, cheapest battery tech that could boost EV sales through the roof is in China. Will Scout Motors rip a page out of Ram's playbook? And will Canada play its ultimate wild card on US auto? Welcome to another episode of Trucked Updates, where I cover all EV truck news for the month. And what a frickin' month it was. There's so much to cover, so I'll waste no more time getting all of you totally trucked up, dated. The most surprising announcements all came from the US Old Boys Auto Club, and none of it was good for EVs. Well, maybe some of it if you look a little further along and deeper into the news, but up front, not so pretty. Remember last month? GM shocked everyone with the best EV sales numbers in their history, while closing the gap on Tesla and getting in range of that magical number of producing 200,000 EVs annually after hitting Q3 sales of over 66,000 units. Yeah, that's in a mere 3 months, bringing year-to-date sales to almost 145,000 EVs by the end of September. Sounds great! Every model rocketed up, and happily, so did GM's EV truck segment. So nothing but blue skies ahead, right? Well, GM didn't think so, and whacked us EV enthusiasts right in the frickin' forehead with a wedge of lemon. Oh, I forgot to mention, the lemon was tied to a Hummer EV battery pack. It just announced it's gutting its EV division and slashing jobs and assembly lines at its Factory Zero by over 2,000 workers. But despite the fudchuckers already out in full force calling this another who killed the electric car moment like back with the EV1, that's just a whole heaping helping of horse and buggy chips. I mean, really? We all know what's going on. What just happened? Every US consumer considering an EV as their next purchase all had to scramble to get the last of the now dried up US federal EV incentives, possibly creating a bit of a mad rush to get their hands on that fleeting cash. Not that North Americans don't plan ahead or leave anything to the very last moment or anything. But that's exactly what seems to have occurred. EV numbers surged in almost every category. In fact, according to Cox Automotive's numbers and Inside EVs that reported on those numbers, every EV model sales went up year to date except for the Tesla Model Y. So what the heck is going on? Why would GM pull back so dramatically on the EV space, especially when it's doing so well? Well, there's no doubt it's feeling the pinch of a complete about-face federal auto policy that leaves its internal combustion division looking like a better short-term profit bet, while the EV division just got unceremoniously dragged under the dually tires of the diesel bus for an epic regressive brake stand that the rest of the planet is still going, what the fuck? But looking at this pragmatically, GM is more hedging its bets than pulling any plug. According to GM Authority, the company stated that the decision was, quote, in response to slower near-term EV adoption, and an evolving regulatory environment. Yeah, no shit. Noting that it remains committed to U.S. domestic manufacturing, even as the company, quote, adjusts its output. GM's Factory Zero is responsible for the assembly of products like the Chevy Silverado EV, GMC Hummer EV, and Cadillac Escalade IQ, and is currently idle. Even though all of these models were good sellers last quarter, it will stay that way until November 24th, and then operate on 2 shifts until the holiday break, and then reopen with only 1 shift for the new year. But that's not the end of it. It is also pulling back on battery production, affecting another 1,000 jobs. So this is quite the blow for the U.S. auto sector short term. And I need to emphasize that again, short term. GM has been very clear that it sees U.S. EV adoption, not global, U.S. EV adoption, again accelerating, as it did in Europe once people forgot about the lost incentives that they had there. Keep in mind, the exact same consumer behavior happened in Germany and much of the EU, and the slump in EV sales was profound. and it took a year or more to rebound. But it did, and has only accelerated since. And now Europe EV sales are almost triple that of the United States. Besides, none of GM's lines are closing, nor is it pulling the plug on any of its EV offerings. The company has no way of knowing what kind of demand will happen post-incentive. So saving $1 billion or $2 billion and waiting things out seems to be CEO Mary Barra's current, strategy. And I think it's not a bad one. I would have to agree with her. Americans rushed in all at once to take advantage of those vanishing incentives while they could, which means many of the buyers who might have been buying from now until Christmas might have already done so. There's no way to tell. We'll know soon enough whether the projected, fall off the cliff comes to pass to the degree the big three are forecasting. But here's the thing. There's a key point being overlooked by mainstream media here. There was a rush for EVs in the US. Let me say that twice. There was a rush for EVs in the US. What does that tell you? People want them. They didn't just buy them to get a bit of free money on a vehicle they didn't want. The incentives did exactly what they were supposed to do, make it possible and more affordable for people to buy the vehicle that they do want. But according to a few sources like J.D. Powers and S&P's reporting, that fall off is already underway. October, we've seen somewhere in the neighborhood of like a 7.5% to 8% decline in sales. So if we take a look at how much increase in sales before, some estimates are saying it's as much as 57%. So looks like they might have made a prudent call by just holding back for a few months. But 1 month's sales doesn't decide a quarter, and 1 quarter's sales don't decide an annual trend. And no matter what, United States with EVs, we're seeing a trend. When I said GM hasn't dumped any EV offering, that's not entirely true. There was another piece of crappy October news, and it slammed Canada pretty hard. GM announced it has killed its Brightdrop EV commercial van with no plans to restart production, shutting down the Cami plant in Ingersoll, Ontario, Canada. I never felt GM's heart was really, there. It wasn't really in it with this vehicle. Most Canadians didn't even know it was made in Canada, or for that matter, even knew it existed, along with millions of Americans, because GM really didn't do a good job. If they thought they were promoting it, they did a real crappy job of it. A lot of small to mid-sized businesses didn't know about the thing, so that's your primary market. Or making it competitive. It was much higher priced than the competing Ford e-Transit options and less capable and pricier than Rivian's own electric delivery van, or EDV. And on that note, it looks like October will be remembered as the month when Rivian's electric delivery van made its debut in Canada. But before we get into that, I've got an exclusive video coming up from my paid Patreon and YouTube members related to more wild news on Thor, my F-150 Lightning Flash that got written off by the insurer. As a member, you get access to these monthly videos and advanced releases of all my regular ones. There's more to come on the Thor saga that you won't want to miss, so make sure you subscribe and click the bell down below to get notified. Thanks again for all your support. Amazon recently put several Rivian EDVs into service in the greater Vancouver region, and more are on the way. And now that these vans can be purchased by any licensed business, even a single unit, and especially with GM shuttering the Brightdrop van, I expect we'll see a lot more Rivian EDVs being built and on the roads. But it's not all peaches and cream over at Rivian either. It's having to watch its pennies as it works to get its more price point appealing, cheaper R2 models to market and ramp that production up. Even though Q3 sales did well, Rivian nevertheless felt a need to lay off 600 people, or 4.5% of its workforce. Many analysts feel, however, that Rivian is doing a decent job of increasing its revenue and lowering its losses as it struggles to make that jump to a larger mass market. If you watch this video, you'll know I got called all kinds of names for putting out so-called clickbait, which I don't do, claiming I was anti-EV truck, anti-F-150 Lightning, and sowing FUD about the Lightning, and that production was only being halted by a mere week or so due to the aluminum plant fire that happened, and I was exaggerating things, etc., etc. But as I pointed out in that video, Ford was already shifting its limited aluminum supply to the more profitable lines, and clearly stated that the Lightning might go back to full production, quote, in the new year. I speculated, however, that Ford, with all of Jim Farley's 180-degree narrative pivots these days, going so far as roasting his own frickin' truck, might be considering using this supply tragedy as an excuse to shutter production. Well, it turns out that's exactly what good old Jimbo did. According to EV.com and Ford's own press release, Ford has halted production. And I quote the word that follows it clearly, indefinitely. That's what's in Ford's release, that they have halted production of the Lightning indefinitely. And also, as predicted, Farley's reasoning was pretty blunt. We make more profit off the other models. Does that mean it's dead? I don't think so. But it might take some serious complaining by its loyal customers to realize that the Lightning is a slow burn sales success. It just keeps slowly growing and getting more noticed and popular. And Ford is doing the exact opposite of what it should be doing to bring about the success of the full-size, light-duty EV pickup. To further drive home where Jimbo's mind is at, because who knows, it seems to flitter about these days, in the midst of this aluminum shortage, Ford still managed to schedule a large increase to the output of gas F-150s by over 50,000 units, adding almost 1,000 workers to ramp that up. I'm hoping the markets and consumers prove yet again that Ford might be making some bad choices here. We'll see how sales go, especially with the replacement of the standard battery XLT with the new longer range STX. If you haven't seen that video, check it out right over here. We had some morsels surface in October that are somewhat revealing as to what we might expect once the first of the Scout Traveler SUV and Terra pickups roll off the assembly line. In an interview with Bloomberg TV, Scout Motors President and CEO Scott Keogh revealed that over 80% of all Scout Motors reservations so far are for the EREV, or extended range version of both the truck and the SUV. At the time of the interview, Keogh estimated Scout Motors' total reservations at around 130,000 units, with over 100,000 of those preferring a version with an onboard gas generator. Will it go the way of Ram and ditch the pure EV version altogether? What I gleaned from the interview is that there doesn't have to be a preference of one over the other, in that, unlike many existing factories that are having to be scrapped or rebuilt every time there's a fundamental production change, Scout Motors designed its upcoming factory to produce either in tandem of both models. But with those kinds of numbers, the short-term tactic might be to dump one in favor of the other. And Keogh hinted at this when he said, quote, "Look, the market has spoken. Over 80% of the reservations are for the range extender. In general, in life, you like to meet the market. So certainly we would probably lean with the EREV, but nothing we've announced yet." I don't know. That kind of sounded like an announcement to me. Both are being developed. Both of them can be handled at the manufacturing line. We'll announce that as soon as possible, unquote. I don't know how that sounds to you, but to me it sounds a lot like the REV Ramcharger saga starting to unravel all over again over at Scout Motors. However, if Scout can convert those pure EV pre-orders of 30,000 trucks and SUVs in its first year, that would be a stellar achievement by any EV measure in the United States. Also, Scout Motors needs to tread lightly here. It's invested billions, and it knows that what is policy-driven today might not be policy-driven tomorrow. Keogh also spoke to this when he acknowledged that the long-term trend, US trend, is definitely toward EVs over gas. But also, and I think Keogh is weighing this in as well, is that a lot of the details aren't out yet, including the generator motor type and size and what changes between the two trims when you go from EV to EREV. How many of those EREV reservation holders know that they'll be losing the highest density NMC batteries in favor of lower density LFPs, or that their towing capacity will drop by half from 10,000 pounds in the EV to 5,000 pounds in the EREV? Will they still be happy to go, with 150 miles pure EV range and getting the rest to 500 miles via gasoline, versus a comparable 350 miles in a pure EV if it means more power and capability for each of those miles? Scout Motors is smart to let this develop and see what actually converts once all the details are common knowledge and orders begin to be filled. Besides, it's a long freaking way to mid-2027, and battery density, basically weight per kilowatt hour, is almost changing daily, along with cost per kilowatt hour. What if Scout, by the time it gets to trucks off the assembly line, has a pure EV option exceeding 400 miles for the same price as today? Interesting times. In fact, the final chapter of the EREV saga has yet to be fully written. One development that this channel might be a part of could offer a third option that might boost pure EV truck sales over EREVs if people realize that they have another extended range option to get to the same place without losing their towing range, but probably at a fraction of the cost. I know, I'm teasing, but stay tuned. I promise you'll know a lot more when I do. October brought the Cybertruck in line with other Tesla models. On October 3rd, it received access to the latest version of FSD, something that it lacked until now. It was the only Tesla model that didn't have full self-driving. From early reviews, it's smoother and more real-world functional than even on the Model Y, so that's good news, and it could use some. It had yet another overall bad month, on top of Elon Musk having to use his other companies such as SpaceX and XAI to buy up the vast unsold inventories of the highly polarizing pickup, basically buying Cybertrucks from himself. It got hit with a second lawsuit over a deadly California Cybertruck crash. The lawsuit claims that a catastrophic design flaw, the door handles, is to blame for deaths of 3 people. And only a day ago, just before recording, the truck issued its 10th recall related to its off-road light bar, potentially flying off and causing risk to other drivers. Again, it looks like it's an adhesive issue like it was with the wing strips that came off, since it currently is glued onto the truck. But the recall will have all the vehicles affected come in and have it bolted on instead now. This only affects a little over 6,000 of the estimated 40,000 units out there, since the light bar is a special order service installed option. So it's not every truck, and it's not a biggie, but it's another strike against that's not going to do it well in the press. We're all now very clear of the narrative change by the big 3 automakers and how we're hearing about EREVs as the answer for full-size pickups moving forward, or from startups like Tello, Slate, and even Ford's new Model T Moment platform that tiny truck-like EVs are the future. But someone, or more appropriately somewhere, might have a say in all of that, and that, of course, is China. Like Toyota did when it came to dominate the mid-size gas truck space in America, almost wiping out some of its competitors, and to this day still leading by a substantial margin with its Tacoma line, China is poised to do the very same thing to this segment with EVs, if its numerous private companies can ever get a foothold in the US market. Now, we know 2 things are holding EV trucks back from dominating over internal combustion trucks, and that's battery density and the cost of those batteries. October brought the announcement from Chinese battery maker CATL, the largest EV battery producer in the world, that it will begin shipping its sodium batteries to EV automakers early to mid-2026. So no, this is happening. Sodium was never an option due to its very low battery density, but CATL seems to have cracked that nut and is already demonstrating its market-ready cells on par with the energy density of LFP, or lithium iron phosphate batteries. More importantly, it has no thermal runaway risk. It'll last far beyond the lifespan of the underlying vehicle, operates and charges close to peak efficiency in extreme temperatures, and is estimated to cost a fraction of that of NMC and LFP chemistries. The new CATL Naxtra battery boasts a pure electric range exceeding 500 kilometers or 310 miles. It also has a lifespan, get this, of 10,000 charging cycles. That's translated into a projected road life of 3.6 million frickin' miles, significantly longer than anything else, than lithium iron phosphate and especially nickel, manganese, cobalt. It gets even more nuts when we factor in that the Naxtra battery retains 90% of its efficiency at minus 40 Fahrenheit, which puts the boots to everything else on the market, including gasoline and diesel. Oh, and those charging speeds that we always hear about that are negative with EVs, well, charging speed challenges can be accelerated in winter. They become more of a problem. But CATL solved that, and they solved the overall charging challenge because they're achieving a state of charge from 10% to 80% in just 15 minutes, and maintains those fast charging capabilities across a wider operational range from minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit to 158 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, think about this. One of the most abundant resources in the world, okay? Like sodium is the sixth most common mineral on Earth, and utilizing no cobalt, no lithium, no manganese, no nothing, and a shelf life of potentially multiple decades. Like, it sounds like the holy grail of battery chemistries. Its only single major downside, it seems, is it doesn't have the energy density of NMC. But this is no pipe dream. Cars will be on the road in 2026, 2027 model year using these batteries. Chinese car company Li Auto is already planning which of its models will use them. And to demonstrate just how mind-blowing this is, the average cost of LFP batteries, which are much cheaper, by the way, than NMC already, average around $55 to $60 per kilowatt hour. What do you think will happen to the price of EV trucks when the underlying battery cost is $10 per kilowatt hour? And you might be saying to yourself, Simon, you just missed the biggest point of all, because trucks use NMC for a reason. They're not using LFP. That incredibly low battery density would mean crappy range or huge weight, one or the other, making it no better than what's on the road now. Well, good for you. Nicely done. You're partially right, other than the fact that all those EREVs we've been talking about that are coming to market that everybody wants because it solves the hybrid EV challenge thing are all forecast to use LFP cells, which are almost equivalent in battery density to the new sodium Naxtra CATL battery. And just like with LFP when it first came out, I imagine the battery energy density of these sodium batteries is only going to increase over time. I mean, this was considered impossible a year ago or 2 years ago, and now it has the same battery density as LFP. But the best part is that not only can these batteries be combined with a range extender to make an EREV, they can also be paired with NMC batteries in tandem to create the optimal mix of cost, range, weight, and versatility depending on the application. But what many North Americans don't know about China and where things are going is how many pure EV trucks are already produced in China and being sold just about everywhere else in the world other than in Canada and the United States. But as this video is about EV truck news this month, I'm only going to talk about one of them. Stay tuned for a future video where I highlight all the Chinese EV and EREV trucks already being produced or on their way. So in October, the JAC or JAC T9 Hunter mid-size EV truck launched in many of its key planned initial markets, such as South Africa, Malaysia, New Zealand, Australia, I think Pakistan's in there, with more global reach rolling out in 2026. So it's going to hit everywhere. And this is right in this is the mid-size truck. This is like your Colorado. Okay, this is in that Tacoma zone. This is in the Ranger zone. Okay, and already an LFP chemistry pure EV truck, here's an example of where one might see sodium in the future, because your battery energy density for these two are the same. So you can expect 500 kilometers or 300 miles of range. It's taller than a Ranger with more clearance. It's wider than a Tacoma with more luxurious interior, and it's cheaper than either of them, coming in at a US equivalent of $35,000 fully equipped. That just launched. And its competitor in the affordable mid-size pure EV truck space, if it ever arrives in North America? Yeah, that's right, there isn't any. I mentioned how Chinese auto companies are looking for new global sales and manufacturing hubs and a way to establish their brand in the North American market. Well, it turns out they might have found one. In 2023, at the request of the US auto sector and the Biden administration, Canada put in place a matching 100% tax or tariff on Chinese EVs coming into the country, with the assurances that this would cocoon and protect both our auto industries together, a form of short-term protectionism to allow our combined domestic automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis time to catch up and to innovate in the EV space. So when the floodgates finally opened internationally, the Canadian and US EV auto sector would be stronger and more resilient than ever. Well, I don't think I need to elaborate on how all of that panned out. Since all those benefits have now vanished, and Canada's largely a big three owned auto sector is being decimated, the country has to look for other players and a domestic production base to support that manufacturing and distribution. It may seem to many of my US trucked up viewers that Canada is a small market, but it is currently the largest buyer of US made pickup trucks outside of the US. In fact, Canada is the US's largest export market for all of its automotive industry. That is now being dismantled. But Canadians are still looking to buy domestic autos, or to at least have choices in electric vehicles with EVs that the big three continue to fail miserably at or stop producing. The current Canadian government was recently in Asia, where a Canadian prime minister and a Chinese president sat down and met for the first time in over 7 years. One of the top items on the list was the removal of those taxes in exchange for the ones Canada suffered when it supported the US request, and China retaliated, of course, hitting Canada's agricultural and fisheries industry really hard. If this happens, Canada might soon lift those taxes on Chinese EVs. I've got a sneaking suspicion, a pretty good idea, what might happen soon after that. I expect something similar to what's occurred in all of the EU, the Middle East, Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Mexico, Central and South America, and most of Asia outside of Japan and Korea. EVs at half the price, better build quality, better specs, longer warranties, might entice a lot of buyers in short order. And with the Canadian government looking to reintroduce EV incentives in the upcoming budget, I imagine this would supercharge EV adoption beyond its already rising levels. Rumor has it that any agreement to remove EV tariffs would coincide with some form of domestic EV production commitment, but we'll know soon enough. Once I hear an official announcement, I'll ensure I get you all of the details. It's time for Viewers Corner, where I post your pics, your stories, and your trucks. If you have a brief EV truck story to tell, have some portraits of your ride, your trip, or your experience, please send them to me via the email in the description below, and I'll post them here. Christopher sent me some pics and a bio just before my September Viewers Corner. I was really moved when he informed me that my cross-country, Canada-wide trucked-up coffee stop tour really showed him that there was nothing to fear about owning a Lightning in Canada, and he went out and picked up a 2023 Lightning Lariat in August in the province of Manitoba. Now, for those who worry about home charging, Christopher got by for the first several weeks of owning it no problem off a regular 120-volt outlet, since his daily commute's about 50 kilometers or 35 miles one way and back from work. He just plugs in after work, and sometime in the wee hours while he's sleeping, the truck is topped up. He's scheduled to get his house hooked up with a level 2 charger right away. And even better, he's getting a full rebate up to $2,500 from the provincial government to install that level 2 at his house. But if he needs to, he can just go around the corner from his house and juice up for no charge anyway. Within 2 kilometers or just over a mile from his front door are free chargers. He gets about 25 kilometers free while he's at Walmart shopping, which of course is one damn smart move by Walmart. Now, for those of you who don't know Saskatchewan and Manitoba, the wind, well, it can suck the hair off your head. And Christopher found out when he took a 2-hour one-way highway trip where he noticed the most battery drain he'd had since he owned it. And in his own words, he said, quote, "The wind would make Dorothy say we're not in Kansas anymore." But here's what starts to happen when more people own EVs. Because most of us charge at home. So almost all of us have home chargers. So he was going to his friend's house, who also happens to have an EV. And while they hung out for the afternoon, he plugged his truck in at that guy's house. And by the time he went to go back home, he was back up to 93%. So Christopher knows his buddy is, he'll be coming to his house and stealing his juicy electrons when he visits him. So it's kind of a mutual arrangement. It's a different world that starts to actually become not only a far less expensive means of transportation, but also more convenient. When was the last time you went over to a friend's house and then when you went to leave for about $1 on their utility bill, your diesel truck was filled back up? So far, Christopher's only negative experience has been some gas-powered F-150 jackass who blocked the EV charging spots, and while it was charging and he was away, unplugged his truck. There'll always be these intellectually bereft man boys. My buddy and fellow YouTuber Gregory from Simply Gregster EV just drove a Lucid Air across Europe, and you won't believe how far ahead many of these countries are when it comes to adoption and charging infrastructure. Holy crap. And he's such a cool guy. He saw all kinds of commercial EV trucks over there, and he thought of me. I strongly recommend checking out his channel. I put a link to his channel below, as he covers so many cool things in depth, and I love his dedication to adoption and electrification. And if anyone has any doubts about EVs working for everyone in every scenario, you need to check out what has happened with our Scandinavian neighbors nations. Thank you, Gregory, so much for thinking about me and for sharing these really cool pics. I'm currently in the process of binge watching all of your European adventures, so thanks, man. Lastly, please join me in thanking all of these amazing Patreon and YouTube members, along with all of you who have hit the donate button below and helped by supporting this channel financially. On top of the merchandise sales, your support far outweighs all other means of keeping this channel going. Trucked Up EVs surpassed 7,500 subscribers and is on its way to reaching that magical 10,000 strong community, and I couldn't be happier. As always, thanks for watching.